Hey, it's Alan here.
And Bree. And
we
we
are
are the hunter and the hippie.
Connected through yoga and bonded by our love of the wild places and the love for outdoors, we've come together to share our conversations about life.
Well, maybe more so what we've learned or are continuing to learn about life.
And there's no one way to do it. Life, that is.
And hopefully provide you with some teeny tiny bits of inspiration to connect deeper with yourself, others, and our great Mother Earth.
All right. Enough already about the podcast. Let's just get to the podcast. Hey, Bree, how's it going?
What's up? It's been a while.
It has been way too long.
Feels like a lifetime.
I know. I text you. What was it like? Was it a week ago? 2 weeks ago? Just asking how everything's going.
Yeah. And you were watching water polo.
I was watching water polo. It was really interesting. I don't think I've ever watched water polo. And
yeah.
It was really interesting to watch. I feel like it was like hockey and soccer. In a swimming pool.
Yeah. It's like a merge of a lot of, I always I think I say it's cross between soccer, basketball, and like hockey in the water.
It's really weird, like watching them like wind up and like try to like fake each other out. And they're like the way they like swing their arms. And you're like, when you look at it, it's almost like, is that doing anything?
Yeah.
And then like they score a goal and you're like, oh my God, that's amazing.
Yeah, it fakes the goalie out. You do a fake, pump fake. That's what we call it. Pump fake. And the goalie jumps and then you.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was quite interesting to watch. And US did really well.
They got the gold.
Gold, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Against the Russian Olympic Committee, which is so ridiculous. If no one understands like what that is, Russia is like banned from competing in the Olympics because of was it Sochi?
What was was that related to the film that came out on the
with the steroids
doping?
with the doping and the steroids, and the Russians are like major like doping experts, and they're like banned from competing in the Olympics for a certain amount of time, I think. And but they're allowed to compete under the Russian Olympic Committee, ROC. Which
what does that even mean?
My GarageBand is like doing something weird. I see my Wi-Fi going in and out. I hope everything's okay. But anyway, the Russian Olympic Committee, it's like supposedly like the Olympic Committee that's allowed to represent Russia. But when you watch that documentary, I forget what it's called, it actually talks about how the Russian Olympic Committee was part of the scandal. Yeah. And so it's just, I don't know if it's like bureaucracy or what kind of nonsense, but it's just really interesting to see, like, if they're banned, then they're banned. Don't let them compete.
Yeah. It's hard because I can see the side of if you're an athlete who wasn't doping, like, why should you be punished for, like, and you might not know, there's so many athletes, right? And you might not know that it's even going on. But I don't know, when the government is involved with it, I can see then, like, you're not going to stand for a country who allows that. I don't know. It's kind of tricky.
Right. It sucks for the athletes, but that's their country. Like, their own people are the ones who are at fault. And, like,
yeah, but you can't group that's like what we're trying to get away from is like grouping. Oh, well, you're this, so you're part of that, and so you might be it's like you might be a good human, but the rest of the people who are from or do the same thing as you, it's like, when hunters get a bad rap, right? Because there are
Right.
jerk hunters, and now all of
Right.
a sudden, like, you just grouped everyone. Well, that's your country, so.
But that isn't that what the Olympics is? Like the Olympics is a representation of that country.
Yeah. Okay.
Like sure, like there's the individual, but you are you are the symbol of that country.
Yeah.
Like you are the country is you,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I don't know. Maybe I agree, right? Like
You
you're
can't
right.
pick another country. I think that's the challenging thing. Like,
Right.
say in like the NFL, if you didn't agree with the ethics of a team, like you could get traded. But in the Olympics, you're tied. I mean, people do compete for, like, I could technically probably compete for Hungary because of my heritage.
Right.
But like most, you can't just like choose a different country
I'm gonna pick
because
this
you don't
country,
agree.
but
Oh, my country is super corrupt. I think I'll try to compete for this one. Well, that is like how people get into the Olympics, though. They find some relationship to like a teeny tiny country, and then they compete for them.
they're the ultimate in that sport, and that like it's like a country
Yeah.
with like 3 people that actually play the sport.
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah, like
it's so funny.
how many water polo people are there in like a place that's like in a drought, right?
Yeah. No, not so much. You need at least 7 to compete.
There's so much going on since I don't know what we want to chat about, but I feel like I don't want to get political, but I'm probably going to today because
Okay.
this has like been right, like this is part of who I am. In the news, there's a lot going on with Afghanistan, and for those that I don't watch the news, right? Like I'm not going to put on a news channel, but I try to keep up. Like I see what other people are saying about things, and I try to read about what's going on. I try to read both sides. Like if I read an article from CNN, I'll go to Fox, or I'll try to pick, like the Associated Press, and I'll just try to read multiple articles to like actually put like the pieces together. Because each channel is going to give you like one piece, and another channel is going to, and they're going to give you their little, right? I love that. Oh, we're not biased. Bullshit. But there's a lot going on with Afghanistan. We are pulling. I don't know if you know this. Are you aware of like what's going on?
A little bit. I've been so disconnected from the world, and so I started to see things, but I hadn't actually read into anything yet. I just think some posts were popping up on the social platforms, and I was like, I need to, yeah. And usually, actually, my parents, I get a lot of information from them, and they're out here in Cody right now, but we've just been really like, just had a lot of other stuff going on, so we actually haven't talked about it at all. So I'd love to hear yeah.
So when, right, brief synopsis of why we were in Afghanistan, and whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. But when the 9/11 happened, the planes hit the towers, the Taliban, right, Osama bin Laden, head of the Taliban, was in charge, right, was the ones who claimed that. And the Taliban were were the ones we invaded in Afghanistan. They're based out of Afghanistan. Al Qaeda was like Iraq. And so we've been in Afghanistan for 20 years. Right? We've spent trillions of dollars. We've trained the Afghans, the Afghani people. Like we've invested so much time, and this isn't a political thing in the sense that, right, because Trump wanted to start pulling troops from Afghanistan, and I had a problem with it then.
Pulling, right?
He was, yeah. He didn't end it. He talked about ending. He talked about not having a presence there. He pulled troops out, and then Biden came along, and now he just finished it off. We're removing our presence, but it's so weird. There's so many like there's such bullshit going on out there, with like our embassy, So anyway, in the last 20 years, right, the Taliban have not had any part of like really any part like stronghold of the country because of our efforts and us being there and removing us, right? So there's a difference between skill and will, and the Afghani people, they have the skill, right? We've trained them. They've trained side by side with U.S. soldiers, but they ultimately they don't have the will. They don't have the will to fight for themselves and fight alone, and that's shown in the last week. Because in the last week, right, we've claimed we're pulling out completely of Afghanistan. Our lovely president and staff issued a statement, like almost like begging not for the Taliban not to attack the U.S. embassy, and then like shortly after there was another statement that came out that was like, oh, okay, we're gonna evacuate the U.S. embassy because they realize like they're not gonna listen to, oh, please don't attack us.
Can you please?
Right.
Can you please?
Right. So they're like, oh shit, we're gonna evacuate the U.S. embassy, and then it turned into we're gonna send 3,000 troops to Afghanistan, 3,000 new troops to Afghanistan to help evacuate. Right. How in the world does that work? So we're sending 3,000 troops back to help evacuate the U.S. embassy. So it's going to turn into like another 13 hours type thing, and back when, yeah, we don't have to get into that. Yeah. So anyway, when I started my military service in the year 2000, and it was peacetime. It's crazy to think like that everyone who joined after that had known nothing but war, because when I joined, the thought of war was like, we're never going back to war. This is never going to happen. And here we are like 20 years later, still at war. And I'm not going to talk about, so I supported Operation Enduring Freedom, which is Afghanistan, and Operation Iraqi Freedom, which was Iraq. And I'm not going to talk about Iraqi freedom because I disagree with a lot of it, but I signed on the dotted line there, and I'm going to serve my country. But with Afghanistan, I will say one thing about Iraqi freedom, right? Like, there's this whole thing like, why don't you trust your government right now? Like, why don't you trust with the whole vaccine and everything? Why don't you trust your government? There's a whole lot of that right now, and like for me, like I was in the military when there were weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. That's why I don't trust my government.
Yeah.
So I was in 2003. I supported Operation Enduring Freedom and Iraqi Freedom, and it was. I wasn't over there. I wasn't in Afghanistan, but I was in Hunter Army Airfield, which is in Savannah, Georgia. And anyone who went to Afghanistan or Iraq during that time most likely left from our base during that time frame, right? That 2003, beginning of 2003 time frame. We deployed and redeployed over 65,000 troops, and it was.
My ex was one of them.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he went to Iraq.
Wow. During that time, 2003?
2004, 2003 or 2004. I can't remember. Marine, former Marine.
Okay. So he wouldn't have gone through my base, but Marine.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Army.
Just Army
We handled all Army.
Okay. I didn't know if they like go through. Yeah, I don't know the technicals there.
Yeah, Marines usually typically they go through their bases or with the Navy.
Yeah.
But there was just, we ran the airfield operations at Hunter Army Airfield. So we did everything from anything that was in the States that needed to be there, or anything that was there that needed to be back in the States, is what we handle, the logistics and all that. And I don't want to get too dark, but like anything, right? Anything that was here that needed to be there went there. And anything that was there that no longer should be there needed to come back through us. And there was a lot of work and a lot of sadness and a lot of grief, and a lot of, right, like we were working during the height of it. It was like 20-plus-hour days.
Mm-hmm.
We wouldn't even like, we'd get like a break between like flights or during work, and we wouldn't even go back to our barracks. We would just take our tops off, and depending on like how it was outside, we'd like crawl under a Humvee or something and like take a nap for like 30 minutes, or go into an office, crawl under a desk, take a nap. It was, or like someone would run to grab food for everyone and come back. It was a really, it was an enjoyable time. Hopefully no one takes that wrong. It was an enjoyable time in my life. And I felt like, I felt good about the work that we were doing. And so now, like coming right fast forward to today, where we are, whether you agree with the war or not, whether you agree with the last 20 years or not, we are abandoning the Afghani people. We are just straight up saying, you're good to go. Like, we've trained you, you're good to go. And we knew like what was going to happen. Like, this started a few weeks ago, and I saw an article on it, and I was like, oh yeah, give it a month, and Taliban are going to be running the country again. And then my buddy sent me an article like a few days ago, and he said the CIA says in 90 days Taliban will be running the country, and I was like, 90 days? I was like, the Taliban are going to be running that country in like 3. And if you look at like the last 3 days, they've taken over Kabul, they've taken over the airport. Yeah. There's like fire, there's like war going on at the airport where they're trying to evacuate the people from the U.S. embassy. The control of the Taliban is pretty much in the entire country now. And like this 90-day thing, and like the Afghani people, and I'm not talking shit, it's just they don't have the will and the resources to want to fight this war themselves. Mm-hmm. Right? It's the same reason why the Iranians are not free. You have 80% of Iran who wants freedom from, right, the Ayatollah, and right, there's constant uprisings that we've seen through Barack Obama, through Trump. I don't think we've seen much with Biden yet, and they never do anything because just the will to make it happen, and the support, right? People, and you can get down a dirty rabbit hole with this because how much support do we give these other countries? But
yeah.
Anyway, it's just something I've been thinking about a lot, seeing it in the news, seeing this country just go right, like fast forward or rewind. It took 20 years to get where we're at, where the Taliban had no really stronghold and really not a threat to the world. Mm-hmm. And within weeks, we've lost everything. Every hour spent on that airfield, for me, every hour spent of, our finest getting shot at and blown up and killed. Lives. Yeah, all the lives lost, all the wounded, right? Like, we've lost a lot of lives, but we've wounded so many more, right? Our missing limbs, missing legs, burnt, IED explosions. Like, there's so much damage that is going to just go through the next 70 years of life for something that we just wasted. And just to see our government just be like, deuces, Afghanistan, we're out.
Yeah.
Good fucking luck. And then, the argument of, well, how much support do we give them? Well, when they crash.
What do you think?
Well, when they crash 2 more planes into buildings and into,
Yeah.
right, like in 5-10 years when that starts happening again, then we're going to be like, well, how much support do we, right? Why, right? We haven't had a plane crash into a building in 20 years,
Hmm.
right? Why? Right? There's other things that have happened,
Yeah.
but the Taliban ceased to exist for the most part
Hmm.
because of our efforts, right? Keeping, right? So the support, as for the support, I don't have the answers. I wasn't a high ranking person in the military, but what I know is like they needed support, right? Like as far as knowing that they had America behind them, right? The
Hmm.
Afghani people were doing the work. It's not like they weren't doing the work. It's not like they weren't out there, right? It's just they had us by their side, helping train them, right? So it's not like we had a huge presence over there at this time,
Yeah.
right? It wasn't like 2001, 2002, 2003, during all of this, the height of the war, but we just had a presence.
Hmm.
And I think that's what's important. And now to just, and that's why what happened. We're saying, we literally announced, right? Like, the thing about this is we told our enemies, hey, we're leaving.
Yeah.
You're not going to do anything, but we're, right? Like, we trust you. Like, you're not going to fight back or anything like that, but we're leaving. Adios. Good luck with this. And to think that they're like we told them we're leaving this area and they know, oh, this is a perfect opportunity for us to attack.
Yeah.
And then to like issue, I can't stand, right? We have our issues in the States. Like, I'm not saying we don't, but for us to be like, oh, please don't attack the US Embassy.
Yeah.
Like, that blows my mind. We are the strongest fucking country on this earth.
Hmm.
And we are the superpower of the world, and we're standing we're here begging them not to attack the embassy when we know that that's exactly what they're going to do,
Hmm.
because it's happened in other countries, it's happened before. So yeah, anyway, that's my thoughts on it.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad I got up to date on it because I just, again, I had been like seeing stuff and I'm like, I don't actually know what's going on. I've been in a different world. But I think we've said this before. Like Thomas Sowell says, there's no solutions. There's only trade-offs, And
Mm-hmm.
it's like with everything, yeah, and I don't know, I don't have a lot of background or information. I was never in the military. Um, and what you're saying is like I think people don't understand it, and so
Mm-hmm.
then they again like project opinions based off not knowing. They're like, get the
Right.
troops out, and it's like, well, what is the presence? Like, we are gonna have people have paint this picture of like what it presence is, what it was back in 2001, 2002, and like
Mm-hmm.
um and just like you said, like all of these people have invested their like how many years of their lives, and it's just thrown away. And I don't know, like I don't know what the answer is.
Mm-hmm.
Like, do you stay there forever? Like, what does that look like? Like where is our, like, I feel like through history we're damned if we do and we're damned if we don't.
Mm-hmm.
Like, when the times we don't get involved, people criticize the United States, and then the times
Right.
we do get involved, they criticize and they say you shouldn't be in there, and it's
Mm-hmm.
like, well,
Mm-hmm.
what
What is the right answer? I mean, the thing about this, we until 9/11/2001, we hadn't had an attack on U.S. soil
Mhm.
since 1942,
Mhm.
when the attack on Pearl Harbor.
Mhm.
And prior to that, we hadn't had an attack on U.S. soil since the Civil War, I believe. Okay, so I believe, right? So I have thoughts on like our military and our budget, and right, we spend $600 billion a year on our military expenses,
Mm-hmm.
which is larger than any other country by billions, hundreds of billions of dollars. I think China, if we cut our expense budget, our military budget in half, down to $300 billion, we would still be number one
Mm-hmm.
in the world. So cutting it in half, right, saving $300 billion, we could, right, what could we do with $300 billion? There's so many other things that we can do in our country. And I believe the number one goal of our military is protect us stateside,
Mm-hmm.
right? That is that should be our number one goal, is protect our country. And where support comes into play is when you, right, we haven't had a terrorist attack or an attack on U.S. soil since 9/11, right, in the last 20 years,
Mm-hmm.
because of our presence in Afghanistan. Right, so we kept them at bay. So I think it is hard, right? Like you're right, there's no definitive answer. There's only trade-offs.
Mm-hmm.
But having the presence there not only kept us safe, but kept the world safe. Because think about the Taliban attacks that have happened to many other countries prior to that, prior to our presence, right? There was the shoe bomb on the flight from London. Right? Everyone's involved in this. And I think we have a duty as the superpower of the world to support. Right? I think that's the key thing. Is not, right? Support is the key. Right? We have to support the world. Right? Like that's what our reason for being is. Right? Like that's what it is, to see the good in people, to support, like to, right? Not to do the thing for them. Not to, be the one who's always there. I'm not saying we should claim Afghanistan as U.S. territory, like occupy it as U.S. territory. But I think going back to why we have a military, why we have a country, is to protect our homeland.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes you have to go.
Sometimes you have to be proactive to be on the defensive.
Right.
Defense isn't always sitting back and waiting for an attack.
Right. Sometimes the best defense is a strong offense.
Mm-hmm.
So, and there's not a solution for everything. That's not, right? Iraq, I just slammed my mic, sorry. Iraq, what a fucking mistake that was. Like, I mean, yeah, you can go back and forth on Iraq, but that was just a hot mess. And in my mind, like, it could have been handled way different.
Yeah, and here's the thing, like, it's like you said, I don't trust my government, and that's ultimately, like, politics is just, like, how can we sit back and, like, what's happening in China?
Yeah.
Like,
yeah.
Not only are we not standing out against genocide, we're, like, supporting it because we buy everything from China.
100%.
And, like, and then we're pulling out, like, I don't know. It's all it's self-interest, I think, across the board.
Right. Well, and it even goes to oil. You can relate it to oil in the sense that the White House just put out a statement to OPEC to start producing more oil. And we've stopped, or we've tried to stop, or we've slowed down production in the States. And it's totally a not in my backyard type of thing. Right? Like,
but are we going to start another war over oil? Like, here's the thing, like, if we're not producing it, if it's not coming from U.S. soil, like, what is better? I would say coming from U.S. soil.
Agreed.
Like,
100%.
But are we just setting up honestly, like, Are we pulling the troops out because there's a plan to send those troops somewhere else very soon?
Yeah, yeah. You don't know.
I
We don't
mean,
know, and I guess we're gonna find out, right?
hmm yeah, it's, and that's the
And
thing is it's both parties. I think that I sometimes think one party tries to present itself as not being warmongers, and they are.
mhm,
And
both
it's,
sides are.
and that's what I mean.
Yeah,
But at least
100.
one side is doesn't pretend not to be.
Right.
That's my whole thing.
Yep.
Is both sides are doing it, just one side pretends that they're not.
Well, and it goes, in this last statement of like trying to get OPEC to produce more oil. It's frustrating because you have the ability to get oil from our country, and they're like, we're all about this Green New Deal, we're all about green energy, and that's fine. I want reusable energy, right? I want us to renewable energy. I want us to have options, but you can't just turn off oil. Oil
Yeah.
isn't just going to go away.
Mhm. And we can't put, honestly, what we have to learn is we actually can't put all of our eggs in one basket when it comes to energy. That's
Right.
the other problem. First of all, the transition, you can't just turn it off and all of a sudden have, all solar or whatever that looks like,
Hmm.
and not only like oil is helping you store the solar. Like we don't actually realize how everything is so connected, right?
Yeah.
And then we haven't seen the damage that can be done from the solar panels that can't, they get broken and they get sent to a landfill, and the toxicity within that, and they don't break down. It takes a long time to break down. Same thing with like electric cars and the lithium batteries. Like and so that's where I think we really I want more. Yes. I think we need to move into not being fully dependent on oil, but I also think we need to we need to have a balance. If we put everything into, it's really hard to see what the long-term impact will be until it's been a couple decades,
Right.
We're always trying, like we think we're doing better, and then we find out 30 years later, like,
Hmm.
that was a bad idea, And so
Hmm.
think about that. We put everything into one type of renewable energy or greener, cleaner energy, and then we find out, oh crap, now we're like trying to fix this problem, right?
Yeah.
And it's like if you can just allocate, kind of spread it between different sources of energy, we have the ability then to maybe over time see, okay, maybe it makes sense to invest a little more in this, or
Agreed.
and not and also to not screw ourselves over.
Hmm.
I don't know.
100%. I totally agree with that. And I think we've mentioned this concept on multiple episodes before. I think it was your dad who's like, we have to pay for the
We're fixing the problems our previous generation made.
right, and it's just going to keep happening, right? Like there's always going, right? It's because it's trade-offs. There's always
Yeah.
like, what is this generation doing that the next is going to have to fix, and it's just going to keep going on, and hopefully we get a little bit better at it. But,
Yeah.
but to your point, putting all your eggs in one basket, that's going to set you up for failure. Because if a problem occurs, if something happens with that, then that next generation is going to pay for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And we're not, I always see it as we're really not actually addressing the root of the problems.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're talking about, renewable energy, but we're not talking about, hey, maybe you should stop consuming so much. Maybe you shouldn't start using reusable products versus, like, we're not talking about fast fashion or the things, that are the money that's going into people's pockets. right? These big corporations.
Right.
No, we're not. When that's what we do, we treat the symptoms. We're not making a more, I mean, I think there is a movement towards a more conscious future. I mean, like, we're in that world when it comes to think about yoga. And I wholly believe that, like, that is our solution, is creating a more conscious population.
Yeah.
More mindful population that's not just mindlessly, like, that's waste. Like, that's what waste and energy go hand in hand.
Yep.
Right?
Mindlessly consuming, right, versus conscious consumption.
And if the consumers continue to buy, producers will continue to produce.
Supply and demand.
Energy will need more energy. Right? Like, that is all related.
Yep.
But instead we want to say, oh no, like, I think about, like, carbon credits, and it's like, within carbon credits, you can, like, buy someone else's. You might not use as many, like, whatever factory might not use all their carbon credits, but then some other company buys their carbon credits. So are we actually reducing it? No. It's just being shifted around. And the big guys will always find a way to work around things. And we don't get that.
Yeah. Well, and it starts with consumerism, right? You look at something like an iPhone or a phone, smartphone, where we're upgrading and changing these yearly, like working phones. You know, like, and I'm guilty of it, right? Like, you have a working phone, and a new phone comes out a year later, and you're like, yeah, I need that. And what changed? Why? Right? Like, your phone works fine. You know, I have friends that still have super early stage iPhones.
Yeah.
They work fine. They work great.
Yeah.
You know, and all of this goes, again, to landfills, and how does it, right? There's just electronics galore in our landfills. And they don't break down. They don't decompose. And what's, you know, and it goes back to that conscious consumption of starting your movement of, hey, do I really, like, this is the first phone that I currently have. I've had this phone for, I think, like 2.5 years now.
Yeah.
Where I'm like a new iPhone comes out, I'm like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, phone still works, takes great pictures. I have no issues with it.
I don't even know what iPhone they're on at this point.
No, I don't.
I only upgraded mine. I don't know when, maybe 3 years ago or 2.5 years ago too, probably. I got the iPhone 8 because my other iPhone didn't have enough storage. Like, that's where they get you. The operating systems takes up
so
more
much.
and more storage. And so back when I had my other phone, I was like, oh, this is great. And then I do a lot of filming for, like, for online classes, like pre-recorded ones. I'll record it from my phone, and I couldn't even do that because I didn't have enough. So I only upgraded to get more storage on my phone instead of having to, like, continuously, like, make sure things were going up the cloud or deleting photos or, like, but I'm like, oh. But that's how they get you too. Like, that's how the companies do. They're like, oh,
right.
My computer no longer, like, my computer's old enough where I can't even update it to the new operating system.
Because you don't have enough storage, and you can't get rid of.
I don't have enough space.
You can't get rid of enough things.
Then there's like a space. Yeah, I was like looking at the breakdown of my storage, and I was like, "What's this mystery thing that just takes up half my storage?"
Right, there's like 50 gigs. That is, I have no clue what it is. What is it?
It's like ether. I don't know. It's just there. You can't get rid of it. You can't identify it. You can't feel it or touch it, or it just floats there in your operating system.
It's their way of getting you to upgrade. It's like, we're just going to take up 50 gigs of storage from this lady's computer.
Just like mysteriously shows up one day. Yeah. I'm like, dang it. I'm like, how many external hard drives can I get?
For me, it's 15 episodes of The Hunter and the Hippie that takes up all my storage.
Oh, I immediately, once we process it and it's up and launched, it goes, actually, I think even before that, it's
Mhm.
now been going to my external hard drive. So everything
That's
goes
great.
external hard drive.
For the like up through like episode 11, I hadn't deleted anything, and then
Oh,
like
no.
and then my computer started like bogging down. I'm like, what the hell's going on? I look, and there's seriously like hundreds of gigs of audio files from just me and you talking.
Oh my God.
And I'm like, okay, I think it's safe to delete all of these.
Yeah, and then there's two versions of it because you have like the GarageBand
Right.
like file, but then also the MP3 from when you like
Mhm.
offload it from GarageBand.
Yeah.
Like these sneaky, that actually happened on iMovie. I was like deleting things, but then it was staying in my library and I didn't realize it. And I had all these
Yeah.
like things just living that were not used anymore. I'm like, what? Wait, how do I delete it from there? Like, where did this go?
That's funny.
Oh, yeah. Technology's not my strength.
No, same. I feel like I can navigate through it, but it's a pain in the ass for sure.
Yeah.
So we have a lot going on in our lives right now. It's definitely like summer. We're like flourishing. We're both like in tank tops right now.
Yeah.
Like we're like, you know, like summer, like you take your clothes off, right? You do. You open up, you show yourself to the world. Right? And like that's the time to be out there doing your things, and that's like exactly where we're at right now, both of us. Like
Yeah.
I'm not at home.
Yeah.
And I've been on the road working for the last 7 days, and it
Dang.
continues until Wednesday.
Yeah.
But with that said, I think we're going into part 2.
Yeah.
But first, we need to just give our people a little bit of breathing. We talked about some heavy topics
Yeah.
for this first part of this episode,
Mhm.
and I think we can lighten it up a little bit for the second part of the episode.
But can I say something?
Yeah, please do.
This is actually great that you're bringing up like heaviness and like
Mhm.
should we lighten it up and whatnot, because I think, and I just was in a yoga therapy 2-week
Mhm.
yoga therapy training, and it's all about it's embracing those polarities, right? The
Mhm.
natural polarities, the totality of humanity. Like that's my teacher, Kamini Desai, one of my favorite quotes. And she says, I realize that the power lies in the totality of my humanity. And so often it's like we bring up heavy topics and we want to avoid it, right? We're like, oh, that's too heavy. We don't want to like bring people down. But it's part of life, right? And it's without that heaviness, we can't have the other side of it. And you know what? There's someone out there who it might have changed their life to be able to like bring some of those heavier topics into our podcast because no one else is talking about it.
Yeah.
And like,
100%.
and it's the humanness. Like that's, it's okay. It's okay that there's heaviness,
The heaviness impacts like this Afghanistan thing. It might have zero impact on you. You might think of it like, I don't care. I mean, it has way more impact than you realize if you're that person, right? But maybe you just don't care, right? Like it has no day-to-day impact on you, and that's great. But maybe like to your point is there's that person who spent years there, right? Multiple deployments there, and they hear this, they hear us talking about it. And, maybe it's that did happen, that did exist, and I'm allowed to feel the way that I feel about that, and I think that's powerful, and I love that because it is life is the human experience is about the totality of it. And I end all of my yoga classes with, right, the light and the darkness in me respects, appreciates, and honors the light and the darkness in each of you.
Yeah.
And because, I hear teachers say, oh, the light in me recognizes the light. Well, yeah, that's great. But what about the other half?
Mm-hmm.
Right? It's the darkness that gives us the ability to appreciate the light.
Yeah.
And it's the darkness that we need that gives us a reason to look for the light.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I think that we have to be, in order to be whole, in order to be complete, we have to have both.
Mm-hmm.
We have to have the heavy topics.
Well, and that's actually the lineage that I'm studying, like I'm just steeping in right now and studying. They have the Asatoma prayer, and it says, lead me from the unreal to the real, lead me from darkness to light. But they say light is the all illuminating light where both darkness and light exist.
Mm.
And so it's like when they say light, it's not the opposite of darkness, it's where both of those exist together. That's the actual light, is that totality, versus one or the other, and like that's so much of our, I think we've talked about this, but like that's where most of our suffering comes from, is avoiding the heaviness and seeking, or avoiding the pain and seeking the pleasure. And you're not really avoiding it. You're just going to create blockages within yourself that will at some point potentially transpire into like illness or disease, or it'll surface at a time that you not as really ideal to surface.
Yeah, you can't handle it. And you're not prepared to handle it. And, right? It might not be disease in the sense that we know it of, right? Like cancer or something like that, but it services in mental illness and divorce and all.
But it could be cancer.
Yeah, absolutely, it could be 100%.
Yeah.
Right, because you have all of that in you that you're not. Right, you're holding on to it, and it has to. If you're not getting rid of it or you're not dealing with it, it has to turn into something.
Yeah. That was I think I was talking to, I don't remember, it doesn't matter, but the other part of that is when your body's working so hard to kind of recalibrate from stress or whatever it might be, it doesn't have the energy to do all the other healing components. And so you have this more likelihood for something could be lying dormant in you, and it appears, or like it makes you susceptible for cancer, malignant cells to start reproducing, because your body's spending all this time trying to manage the stress.
Right.
And it only has the capacity for so much. So it's being occupied here, then it doesn't do what it naturally can do, that's meant to do, which is healing, all keeping the balance, the homeostasis inside of you.
Right.
So it might not necessarily be what created the malignant cells, but it's what allowed them to run rampant.
Yeah. To fester.
Because, so we can breathe.
So let's breathe out of this episode.
And into
the next.
Okay.
All right. It's on you.
Whoa. No pressure.
Pressure. None at all.
But then are you going to journal, or should you do a journal prompt now?
I should do a journal prompt. I should do a journal
We'll breathe out and in.
So grab your journals and think about two things. I want you to do two things. So if I want you to write down where you were on 9/11, 2001. Everyone knows that answer. Everyone knows the exact thing that they were doing that moment. You feel it. I feel it now. Right? I want you to write your feelings about it. I want you to write everything. Where you were, what was happening, everything. Every feeling of sadness, worry, fear, just everything. Just dump onto that paper, like verbal diarrhea right onto that paper about everything from that moment. And then once you've done that, that's great. Just get that out, right? And maybe something will come up that you didn't notice that was there. Right? And maybe you're listening and you're like, 9/11/2001, wasn't born yet. So if that's you, that's great. But what I want you to do is what did you learn about that? What have your parents told you, right? Because you're still impacted by that, and you have stories by that. Like your parents have told you stories about that. If you're a listener of this podcast at this point, like you've heard stories about 9/11, whether you're there or not, and think about how that's impacted the way we fly, right? If you were alive in 9/11 and you have some years behind you, right? How we fly, how we used to fly prior to 9/11, how we fly now. Just how the way things are. Then the second thing is in short form, write journal about the last 20 years. Okay, the last 20 years from 2001, from 9/11 until today, 2001, to today, 2021. And how has 9/11 impacted your life? How were you in the military? Were you deployed? Were you over in Afghanistan? Were you over in Iraq? Were you not? Were you supporting? Did you have nothing to do with the military? Did you have friends, family? I think it's pretty safe to say that a lot of us have friends and family that have all served over there at some point. And just write about what it means that in 20 years, and this isn't this isn't about agreeing or not agreeing with us or with pulling out of Afghanistan or not. Right? There is an impact. There's a trade-off, like we've mentioned. Right? There's a trade-off for us going there, and there's a trade-off for us coming back. So write about what your thoughts are on now, right? Taking the last 20 years that we spent in a country, supporting, monitoring, apply a word to that, this country that, for whatever reason we're there, right, to try to manage the Taliban. Now we pull out and everything is rewound 20 years in. We'll say a month, right? And in 1 month we've lost 20 years of so-called progress. And maybe just think about that and think about how that's going to impact life as we know it. And if you're in the military now, maybe you're like, fuck yeah, I get to come home. Or I don't have to ever go back to Afghanistan. And maybe that's you, and that's cool, right? Like we're all allowed to feel that. This is, again, our stories from our lives and how we see it. And it's never to exclude anyone. And with that, I'll turn it over to Bree.
All right. Well, we'll breathe. And you're going to, I think the plan is nice little editing. We'll just do one long breathing and you'll use the same one to open it. Is that the plan?
That's the plan. That's
okay,
the plan.
Great. I don't have to do two. I'm not doing two. Okay.
No,
mentally prepare.
The plan is to pick your breath up right from where you left off and go right into it.
All right. So if you are seated, find a comfortable seat or lie down. If you can't lie down, just maybe soften the gaze or feel just an internal awareness. So closing your eyes if you can. And then just take a few breaths, natural breaths, to begin noticing how your body and your breath feels right now. You might notice which areas of your body receive your breath, which areas might find some constriction denseness. Not looking to change it, but just observing. Observing your entire body, the range of sensations, the impact of your natural breath. And I invite you to think or imagine maybe a heavy experience, and you get to choose how heavy it is. And just imagine all the details, or begin thinking about all the details. And if you don't want to approach something very heavy, maybe it was just a small trigger from a comment someone made, a conversation, maybe it was a red light that you got stuck at. So just any heavy experience within your capacity right now. And as you think about this experience in detail, or imagine it, start to notice where it shows up in your body. Maybe you place your palm on it for just a moment. Notice the sensations in this area of the body. And begin to slow down your exhales. As you slow down your exhales, feel the impact of the parasympathetic nervous system. And then release the story or the thoughts or the images around the experience, and just be left with the sensation. And if it changes, just stay with it. Continuing to breathe with it. Again, not to change it or control it, but to allow it to exist just as it is. To create space for it. You might even say it's okay that you're here. And continuing to observe it as it changes or moves, and breathing with it. Knowing that you can be with whatever arises and your breath. You can be with heaviness and experience ease at the same time. You can be with whatever is just as it is. Gently drawing your chin towards your chest. And when you feel ready, slowly fluttering your eyes open.
Thank
Welcome back.
you.
If you want to follow us and our adventures, you can find both of us on Instagram. I'm at Bree Allison. That's BreAllison.
And I am at The Life of Alan Tatone, underscores between each word. To check out our offerings, yoga, one-on-one trainings, workshops, retreats, and a recorded library, you can find the info on our website, thehunterandthehippie.com.
If you have questions for the podcast, about the podcast, feedback, suggestions, or just want to say hi or find ways to work with us, our email is thehunterandthehippiepodcast@gmail.com. And don't worry, all of this will be in our show notes.
Thanks for tuning in
Hopefully you weren't tuned out.
to the Hunter and the Hippie podcast.